hopes that you're all happy. So let's first bring forth a motivation or a thought that what we're going to do with our coming together today is we're going to try to establish this coming together today as a cause of both temporary and ultimate happiness. And also thinking, that as we engage in our spiritual practice, that we're engaging in the spiritual practice not just for those goals that are very far off, but also our spiritual practice on the temporary level helps us to achieve a mind that is more peaceful and subsequently both positive physical and mental health. So another instruction of the Buddha, and indeed of all of the other holy beings, which is very important, even when we think about the 6 different types of beings within samsara, within cyclic existence, is that all of them possess what in Tibetan we call rik, which you can say lineage, but lineage in the terms of potential. All beings possess that potential for awakening.
So
all sentient beings are the same in possessing this lineage or possessing this potential to be able to achieve that state of perfect happiness and also to be able to clear away any type of problem, from the very smallest problem to the very biggest problem. And so in this way, we understand that our happiness is not achievable necessarily upon external factors. We don't have to rely only on external factors, but we can also cultivate those inner causes of happiness. But so we have these potentials, or we have these seeds, but to use an example, if you keep an apple seed in a paper box at home, that apple seed is not going to be of much use to you, is it? So in order to get the tasty apples from the tree that will grow from that seed, we need to first place the seed in fertile ground. We need to place it in fertile ground and make sure that we water and fertilize it. Then it will be able to bring forth fruit. However, we also understand that that potential is something that is shared by all migrators, all 6 types of beings within samsara. They have that lineage or potential within themselves, but to be able, whether or not they have the chance to be able to ripen that potential, to build on that potential, is a question. To have the opportunity to ripen this potential within is something really extraordinary. So within those 6 types of beings, we often state that within those 6 types of beings, the human rebirth is the very best for spiritual practice. And not only that, but all of us, we possess this human rebirth with all of the freedoms and richnesses, a precious human rebirth, even better than a normal rebirth. So when we reflect on these things, it's supposed to bring forth a mind of confidence. It's supposed to bring forth a mind of joy. And from reflecting in this way, all of the self-doubt, the stress, the unhappiness, this will be dissipated when we remind ourselves of these positive things. So in terms of being able to achieve that lasting happiness that we spoke about, having the basis of this human rebirth is the very best foundation to be able to achieve that. The bodhisattvas and all the other holy beings state this. So think I'm going to, on the basis of this human rebirth, live a meaningful life of stable spiritual practice and continuously engage in the practice of both analytical and placement meditation. So the holy beings have, they state that it's an important set of instructions. And this set of instructions is especially to be applied when our mind is unhappy, when we are experiencing what the Tibetans call a wind imbalance or a prana, an energy imbalance, when we are experiencing issues with our mental health. And this is the visualization of the mind with the recitation of Pe going into the sky. So when one is unhappy, when you're experiencing too much stress in your life, when your mental health is shaky, all of these can be related to a prana or a wind imbalance for one thing. And so this particular meditation, many holy beings have stated, is very good when you're experiencing that kind of obstacle. And also remember the teachings about the internal body, that when we speak about the mind and the wind or prana, it is said that the mind rides upon wind like a horse, right? So the wind is the mount of the mind. And so it's a little bit like a person who cannot see carrying somebody who can't use their legs on their back, right? By combining the being that can see with the being that can walk, you're able to travel the road. So in this way, right, the wind is like the legs, and it is able to carry the mind. So we can say ultimately the doer of our unhappiness, of our stress, is this mind and its mount of the wind, but also in terms of being able to achieve our ultimate aims, in terms of being able to achieve happiness, this is also connected with this mind and wind. So Geshe has led this meditation before, but he's just giving it to you in a capsule, maybe if there's some people who are here for the first time. We visualize the aspect of our subtle body and mind as a sphere, so a ball shape, a sphere of brilliant white light in our central channel, the Tsa-uma. And the central channel, the Tsa-uma, is what goes from the crown of our head down to the base of our spine through about the center of our body. So that's the visualization for the meditation. Yeah. So we can think when we relax our mind like this, that our mind and its potentials, you can think of like the surface, the bubbly surface of water, right? So when water moves quickly, like there are bubbles, and we can think that within those bubbles, there are these valuable things, right? These potentials that we want to build on or cultivate. So if we still the water for a moment, those bubbles will pop and we will be able to access those positive things. We can think of it like that. So when we, as much as possible, relax the mind's true nature can come forth. And by accessing that mind's true nature, we are then able to more effectively ripen those potentials or that lineage. So please just take a moment together to settle our body and mind. Yes. If the body is uncomfortable, if the mind is disturbed, right, we want to change that, try to get to a more peaceful place. And so we are going to think like the mind, instead of going all over the place, let us place the mind on the rising and falling of the breath. We're going to place our attention and try to focus for a count of 10 breaths, thinking, exhaling, I'm aware of breathing out. Inhaling, I'm aware of breathing in. Maintain that awareness. When think of one's mind and its amount of the subtle wind as being in the aspect of a brilliant white sphere of light. And then we imagine that we push this subtle wind upwards, and in this way, that ball of light representing our whole mind goes up through the central channel, out the top of our head. So as we do this, we say pay. And that ball of light shoots up into the sky and dissolves into the sky. As it dissolves into the vastness of the sky, any unwholesome thoughts, meaningless thoughts, stress, and so forth, doubts, is completely dissolved. You think as a result of this, my body feels light and my mind feels vast. My body feels light and my mind feels vast. On the basis of this now calm and relaxed mind, I am as much as possible going to try to bring forth within that mind an attitude of kindness and loving. On this basis of this potential abiding together with this human rebirth, this body and mind, as much as possible, I am going to try to use this opportunity to make my life one well lived, to make it well lived through focusing on bringing forth love and compassion. In terms of bringing that forth, in terms of any obstacles that may arise, in terms of any unfortunate conditions that may arise, I ask the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for their blessing to help me clear those obstacles. So make this supplication to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas with that pure, focused intention. So we'll recite the prayers together. We'll recite the short mandala offering. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Niryadaya. Refuge in bodhicitta.
Sonju Jidong Zuki Chunam La Changchu Pardu Dani Gyatsu Chi Dagi Chije Jibe Sonangi Jola Benjir Sanje Juba Shedon Sogi Chunam La Changchu Pardu Dani Gyatsu Chi Dagi Chije Jibe Sonangi Jola Benjir Sanje Juba Shedon Sogi Chunam La Changchu Pardu Dani Gyatsu Chi Dagi Chije Jibe Sonangi Jola Benjir Sanje Juba
뭐야 그래서 다 되거든요. 어다 두단이는 샤와니 자나고 샤와 다치 샤와 간제스 저가기나 샤와니데 같이 버렸어.
So when we engage in any Dharma activity, as usual, we understand that it is important to pay attention to the activities at the beginning and the activities at the end.
저는 뭐 내가 가실랬더니 전에 샤와 니네가 샤와도 보게 되어서 뭐기 내비 샤와라고 지기나 끊어도 교와이나 뭐 보게 내서 여보지는 내가 그래서
So it's said that actually in terms of like the main activity, right, the main session, even if there's some sort of obstacle and the main session isn't able to come out well for some reason, based upon the motivation that you established at the beginning, that session will still become a wholesome karma, something positive. And when we speak about the five powers, the power of projection is mentioned, and this power of projection is really like the momentum of that motivation. So the motivation is really important. And in terms of our kind of the five powers, the power of projection, our motivation, it's not such an easy motivation to establish, is it? Because that motivation is I'm going to work continuously to benefit, to help all sentient beings until they achieve enlightenment. So that's something quite vast. And in terms of this motivation, right, it's not like we're going to be able to bring it forth successfully right from the beginning. We understand that like this is a process that depends upon establishing all the prerequisite positive mental qualities, right? So that's our task. And so in order to be able to bring forth these positive mental qualities effectively, the first step is to study, right? We need to acquire that knowledge. And then on the basis of that study, we engage in both analytical and placement meditation. And in terms of the placement and the analytical meditation perhaps is not as difficult a thing as we think about, as we imagine it to be. Many of the holy beings, they state that actually, like in our worldly affairs, we're engaged in analytical meditation a lot of the time.
So
we have this idea that like meditation is something when you're like sort of in this strict lotus posture and isolated and whatever, but that's not necessarily always the case, right? There's other types of meditation. Yeah, so His Holiness the Dalai Lama often jokes with the people that dismiss analytical meditation that in terms of just kind of like sitting still with your eyes closed, even a pigeon can do that. So just sitting still with your eyes closed is not necessarily something significant. So the danger here is that if we focus just on placement meditation for relaxation, or like emptying the mind of thoughts or something like that, and that's all that we do, for some practitioners who practice like that, that's actually going to make your mind more dull rather than benefit it. And we can see this, right? Like, I mean, there are people who, you know, Geshe was saying in India, you know, you meet many people who spend long periods, years even, in retreat, but actually when they come out, they're even more disagreeable than when they went in.
So often
So, you know, the knowledge of Dharma is really important. And in terms of just these emptying the mind, relaxing the mind on sort of a temporary level for a temporary sense of peace, yes, I mean, that's acceptable. But if we are only focusing on that, right, rather than improving ourselves, there's a danger actually that we get worse and worse. Yeah. And the other thing too is that analytical meditation is very important, but in terms of our lack of progress, if the analytical meditation is incorrect, if it's based on a mistaken reason or something like that, then that is also not going to get us the results. So up until now, our analytical meditation has actually been on the wrong object. What we want to do is take our analytical meditation and our placement meditation and place these on the proper objects.
This one,
So whether we begin with the analytical or the placement meditation, how do we begin? Well, if we're focusing on developing samadhi, single-pointed concentration, what we would try to do is familiarize ourselves with an image, right? Like an image of the Buddha. And then we would try to bring it into our mind and maintain that in our mind with the factor of stability. Sorry, it's gotten a bit dark in the room, so I'm just going to turn on the light, so hopefully you can see us better. Just a moment. Yes, it's like Kedrup needs a break, so he's going to turn on the light. I'll be right back. There you go. That should be better. It just got dark all of a sudden.
Hey, Kedrup.
So when we're developing samadhi, when we're developing single-pointed concentration, the factor of stability and the factor of clarity are both extremely important. But in terms of the one that we emphasize first, we first focus on the stability and then we develop the clarity.
Yeah.
So one thing that can happen to the meditator is actually when you sit down and you bring forth that object of meditation within your mind, it can have like kind of a brilliant clarity to it. And because of that clarity, the mind is very enthusiastic and we kind of strive towards that clarity, but we neglect the factor of stability, right? So that's something to be aware of. And if we're using an image of the Buddha, for example, in the first part of the stages, we're not going to try to get every detail perfect. For example, the hand and each of the fingers and so forth. But when you're beginning to develop the meditation, you just want sort of a approximate sort of image of the Buddha's form within the mind. You start there.
So
So when does the meditator shift their focus from the development of that factor of stability to the development of that factor of clarity? Again, it depends upon the meditator. So the meditator has to be aware of the stability. How is it going? Has a measure of stability been achieved? If that measure of stability has been achieved, then one can go on to focus more on clarity. So these principles can be carried over to all the different types of objects of meditation, right? We first get some stability with the object and then we develop the clarity. So to use the example of a Buddha figure again, with the Buddha figure, we first get that factor of stability based upon that perhaps more approximate image. And then once we achieve that stability, then we start focusing on clarity. And in the case of an image of the Buddha, it would be on the details of like how the face appears, how the hands appear, how the finger appears, and so forth. Yeah. So, as the meditator becomes more adept with both the factors of stability and clarity, he or she is going to experience some success in establishing that stability and clarity. But if they think that's enough and they don't need to go further, this is a mistake, because if they don't have a factor of strength of engagement, then also their further progress in meditation will be blocked. Yes. So in this case, what's happened is the meditator has achieved some success with establishing the stability and the clarity of their object of meditation. And so that brings forth like a happy kind of pleasant feeling, right? Like that's a good thing, right? But what happens is if they don't cultivate the factor of strength of engagement, the ability of the mind to necessarily shift between objects of meditation, to direct the mind where it needs to go as one continues cultivation, will not be there. So one won't be progressing in the way that one needs to. Yeah. And also, if we don't establish this strength or this power of engagement as part of our meditation practice, what will happen is that wish to continuously engage in meditation and to strive to improve it will not be present. So that will be an obstacle. So perhaps too much of an explanation, but yeah, an introduction to that meditation. Now we are going to once again try to relax the body and the mind. So we are going to let go of worries and regrets of the past. We are going to let go of hopes and fears for the future. We are going to focus on the present. What is the present state of my mind? What is my mind's nature like in this moment? The mind has the aspect of being clear and knowing. In its vast clarity, it can come to knowledge, to comprehension, any object.
소식 갈색 계절 가야 제도나 세 코로니 강가 리드 통도
What does that mean practically? It means that if we put in the work at developing our mind will be able to cognize, to comprehend any object of knowledge.
마리바 강가 발 저라 간디지 나와서
And subsequently, it will be able to clear away all ignorance. The subtle and the coarser forms of ignorance will be able to be cleared away.
뭐 알았습니다. 뭐 소소 진짜로 버저도 좀 맞아. 되게 생각이
In terms of what that means for us, it means first I must work on clearing away my own ignorance. Not only that ignorance, but also the latencies or the imprints left behind by that ignorance. And through clearing away the state of ignorance, I must achieve enlightenment so that I can lead all sentient beings to that same state. Meditate on bodhicitta. The Buddhist said that love, compassion, and bodhicitta can be brought forth in some circumstances, even by those in the animal. So we are definitely, as a human being, if we put in the work, able to bring forth love, compassion, and bodhicitta. If we think about it like that, this human body that we have right now is not something insignificant, something to be denigrated. This human body with this potential is something that is precious. It is something that is important. It is something that is valuable. There's nothing more valuable than this chance at human. So we'll pause there.
Oh, that is reality. Take a look at it. So, as that installation, you say, merely over Moji. And so me know that me so day, it is Zukatomba. No, she that is. They you are Shabalar, the Chikatomba manager, they would be.
So in terms of that actual object of attainment, that this aspiration of bodhicitta strives towards, we know that that object of attainment has two main aspects. Out of these two aspects, the rupakaya, or the form body, through which one achieves the benefit of others, is the main one. But because the rupakaya cannot arise without the truth body, the dharmakaya through which one achieves one's own welfare, is also essential.
Yes,
yeah. So generally, when one is meditating on the Dharma, and also when one is speaking or explaining the Dharma, a factor of joy is something that is extremely important. But it is said that if that joy is too intense, even that can become a sort of obstacle. So, for example, after the Buddha achieved enlightenment, after his achievement of the state of unsurpassed complete enlightenment, he traveled to various places to meet with disciples and preach the Dharma.
다 대야 demba지가 쳔비다 진짜 치모고 수는데 대치비가 뭐뭐지 다 동반이 또게 등에서도 또게 다 하려고 뭐뭐 다 동반이 또 되는에서도 또게 뭐뭐
And it is said that, for example, when Lord Buddha preached the four Arya truths, the Four Noble Truths, just through hearing that teaching, there were many in the assembled audience who were able to experience not just a realization of emptiness, but some a direct realization of emptiness.
tane koro ya sezo ya sezo koro baba tane baba chichi 내가 또 거야 다시 게 이라 치키 거 가서 자가 이런 두마니에서 또 야 너도야
and it was said that that the Buddha's father, the king, the king, he had an obstacle. He would be towards the end of his life, he would be attending the Buddha's teaching, and he would be like very happy to be attending them. But as he listened to the Dharma, he would not be achieving that same realization of emptiness that others in the audience were.
다 거로 로바 몸보기 치게 중에 토토노요 아래 두마니에서 또 바비체를 토토로 치게
Which is a bit strange, right? If you think about it, a lot of people in the assembled audience, they were achieving the actual Dharma jewel, that realization of emptiness. But the Buddha's father, he wasn't able to achieve that.
다때 가르는데서 지금 다시 코 가자 아니라. 치시게 거로 그래야 돼. 코티 가와데 체탄데 트니키 세트 다다 보게 돼요.
So what was the reason for that? It was said that the Buddha's father was too joyful, too elated, because it was his son that was speaking the profound Dharma. And because of his excitement about the fact that it was his son preaching the Dharma, that acted as a bit of an obstacle towards his attainment. So Geshe said that it's a pretty incredible story to think about.
아니 순지 걸어 놓을 유아와 근데 바다 치니게 간가래 비깔 빠발래 비깔 고이제산일로 사친 보지 거 아니라 빠바 놓을 또 마서 순지자
sorry 라치 샤네
라시 고시 유아와 치제사 그리고 치제사 수시 너보다 와와 아까 고시 유아에서 고시 고시산 로가와
알레 로스
빠바 놓을 퍼시 시우마레 로스
알레 나올라 고 잡네 나올라 조투 마서
다 고도 쉐가 때리나 고산에 꽈서 와서 고시
로스 okay sorry just making sure we get the details in place. So the Buddha, of course, possessed clairvoyance, right? So he understood about the obstacle of his father, right? And the place where he was preaching, where he was teaching the Dharma at that time, it was like a four-doored temple. So through the Buddha's kind of siddhis, through his miracle powers, he arranged that as people were coming to this temple, that his father would be sitting in a place where he was obscured by like a wall or a door or something like that, that he wouldn't be able to see the Buddha. And it was a really sort of strange occurrence because the venue was quite large and most people were able to get inside and have a direct line of vision to the Buddha. But somehow there was like an obstacle of a door or a wall that was blocking the king's ability to see the Buddha. So the Buddha had arranged it, right? So that his father would not be able to get a seat where he'd be able to see him. And this caused the Buddha's father, at first he was discouraged, but then it caused him to reflect, whether the speaker of the Dharma is my son or not, I am not a person who has become a true cultivator, a true practitioner of the Dharma, right? And he began to reflect. And it is said that the Buddha's father at that time, that sort of inflated sense of joy, which was a little bit mixed with that pride, right? About the Buddha as his son, that he was able to clear that away. And after he had cleared away that obscuration, he was also able to achieve the actual Dharma jewel.
Yes.
I understand.
Goja Gala, Sekadi Adi Toga,
Yeah,
Sekadi Se Churu, there's Maratoga. There's
Um,
also wrong Kombala in the thought. Yes.
So it's very important as a meditator to be self-reflective, to understand what is going on in our mind as we engage with the practice of meditation, and to understand when we need to adjust things a little bit, when we need to bring forth one factor or diminish another, right? This sort of introspection is crucial.
다시 그 돈바스 된다 니 단다세 하더래. 세다 벌 토로도야 마로도야 다. 때뭐야 보급이 되는 단다데 손지가 로지데 무슨 게 알았어.
And so there are many stories related of the Buddha that sort of relate this reality of the importance of paying attention to our mind, not having it too elevated, but also not having it right too low or discouraged. It's important to have that equilibrium.
가도나요 바시시 되었을 때는 이거는 되리죠.
So too much joy is, if too much joy can be an obstacle to our practice, then it's kind of, we don't even need to state that discouragement is a huge obstacle to our practice, right? So we need to avoid extremes. And as a way to cultivate the antidote to that, then the story of the Buddha's father is something useful to reflect on. What else can we understand from this story? Some people criticize the Buddha for abandoning his family when he renounced, right? He left behind his wife, his child, his father, his mother, all of his responsibilities. But we see that even though the Buddha renounced those, he was never parted from compassion for those family members. And we can see that because later in his teaching career, he was able to lead his father, for example, to that ultimate state of happiness, to a direct realization of emptiness. So in order to be able to achieve this ultimate aim, which is the achievement of the two bodies, the form body, the Rupakaya, to achieve the welfare of others, and the Dharma body, and the Dharmakaya, the truth body, to achieve one's own welfare, we have a method to be able to work towards those that is complete and unmistaken. And in order to develop those mental qualities, we understand that a preliminary practice to be able to bring forth those positive mental qualities successfully is a method through which we can both accumulate merit and through which we can purify the unwholesome karma and the obscurations that obstruct us. And so as we turn back to our discussion of this king of prayers, when we speak about the actual sort of structure of the text, it is said that when we get to the main body of the text, there are like 16 outlines. And the first of these is a prayer through a pure superior intention, a prayer through a pure superior intention. And then following that, there are 4 important points. So the first of these 4 is thinking about the Buddhas of the past and the Buddhas of this present moment in time, making offerings to all of those beings, offerings as vast as the offerings of Samantabhadra. And then similarly, in this way, through the merit of those offerings, dedicating them to those practitioners who may be here, solitary realizers, to them quickly being able to achieve the state of unsurpassed enlightenment. So there are many reasons that the practice of offerings is important. We understand that also it's the merit to be able to reach that state of ultimate, perfect, and complete enlightenment. But even before we achieve our ultimate goal of Buddhahood, we have many opportunities to be able to work towards the welfare, to the benefit of others. But we need to be able to have the conditions that all of those activities are successful. And one of the best ways to accumulate the merit to do that is through the practice of making offerings.
또 뭐지? 다 니바데 아니 니비 다 손질은 거야 다 제바. 대바순 니한테 우자 전주 세바 다 대지 그런 누구로 다 대서 다 제바로 들어와.
디니파레서 그놈아디 담보차서 냠들에서 나서다 오지.
니비 손질도 다다이 손질.
야야.
대도 못는 거 살아와.
야야.
못해.
러서.
야야.
니바.
니바데 가르레에서 마고비 손질이야 누구로 도게. 괜찮아.
러서.
니디 우자 전주 세바로 지금 손반녀도 줘야.
러서.
다 가르쳐서 괜찮아.
마레 편에서는 놈아디 냠들라서 대변당 상다와 상게.
대니년도 레스 대가로 라차 송았으니
마레 년투당 랑게 Okay, sorry. So just I was confused about something. So and then in terms of the second of these 4 points, it is for those beings that are hearers, that are solitary realizers and so forth, to be able to quickly reach the state of complete enlightenment. I misunderstood something, but now it should be clear. Yeah. Lord Shuba, you did on Roja, So the second of these 4 is taking those here's the solitary realizers and so forth. So these are beings that have entered the path, that they have entered the path, but that they not sort of remain relaxed, but that having entered the path, they quickly certify to that state of final enlightenment, right? To that state of complete Buddhahood. So also hoping that they are able to comprehend the sufferings, the difficulties that sentient beings endure within samsara, and then on that basis to bring forth that wish, that prayer, they reach enlightenment quickly. So also, when we make these prayers, it's important to think that, yes, we're praying for those hearers and solitary realizers who have entered the path to quickly achieve Buddhahood, but we're not like praying for them to do stuff while we sit back here and relax. Making these prayers is also our own aspiration to be able to quickly enter the path and complete it to full enlightenment. Yeah, because we get a little bit attached to like praying for the progress of those holy beings, but not making our own progress. We have this sort of idea that, well, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they're already working really well for the sake of all sentient beings, so I can just kind of sit back and relax and go at my own pace, right? Maybe we have this idea. Yeah. So then the third of these 4 points is related, if we think about our own Buddhahood, for example, then as we said, we need an abode, right? We need a place where we will abide, where we can gather the disciples, the beings who are benefiting and so forth. So the third of these points is related to the establishing of a Buddha field. In other words, the establishing of a pure land, right? The abode of the enlightened being. So if we think of Amitabha, for example, Amitabha Buddha, based upon his prayers, like I think there was Jadangje, right? Sorry. So based upon the prayers and the extensive aspirations of Amitabha Buddha, he was able to establish Dewachen, Sukhavati, the land of great bliss, right? So we want to be able to do something like that.
예신아
So it is said that in fact in Sukhavati, in the Pure Land of Amitabha Buddha, there are no true sufferings that manifest. And similarly, the inhabitants of Amitabha's Pure Land, they all possess the different types of clairvoyance and so forth, right? They are all highly elevated beings. So the commentary is talking about the purification of the abode and the purification of the inhabitants. So this means the purification of the abode, the Pure Land is completely without anything that arises suffering. It's perfect in every way. And the purification of the inhabitants, right? They are all like elevated beings working for the benefit of others.
Yes,
and so this is what we have covered up until now.
Yes,
and as we recite this prayer, it's really important to think about how does this relate to me, right? What are the benefits that I can experience in a practical way, right? How can I sort of make sense of this for myself? This is really important to have when we recite the prayer. And also, we should have the feeling that the embodiment of the advice in this King of Prayers, it very much echoes the pith instruction of Lama Tsongkhapa, where he says that through striving for the benefit of others, one's own welfare is naturally achieved. So now we are on the fourth section of the actual prayer, and this is the and these are prayers to be able to be of benefit to other sentient beings. Okay, sorry. So okay, here we go. Sorry. So we are on page number 5. May as many beings exist in 10 directions, be always well and happy. May all samsaric beings live in accordance with the Dharma, and may their every Dharma wish be fulfilled.
So
we made many prayers, right? For the benefit of beings, I am going to achieve enlightenment. For the benefit of beings, I am going to engage in the practice of the Dharma. And so here we are praying for as many sentient beings as exist in the 10 directions to be always well and happy. So to be always well in this sense means to be without illness, to be without sickness. And it's easy to just say this, may they be well, kind of from our mouth. But if we are really able to understand this, if we are really able to feel this wish, right, for them to be well, to be free from illness, this is actually one of the best practices to achieve our own longevity and good health. If we make this prayer with a real understanding of what it means, and with a real feeling, with a real wish for it to come about, this is actually the best longevity practice we could ever hope for, right? It would be the most profound practice of longevity. On the basis of this, right, one's body becomes relaxed, one's mind becomes happy, one clears away negative karma that might cause life obstacles. When the body and mind become happy, right, longevity is achieved. So there is no prayer superior to this.
Yes, was no din me so ba no chundo suji rong su go was o ta se no ka se ja chim de so na and so ma go jido was.
And this all relates to another saying of Lama Tsongkhapa that a being. Oh, wasn't it? Sorry, this relates to an instruction of the Buddha. My apologies, to an instruction of the Buddha where he says, one who is endowed with great merit has their aims accomplished exactly as they wish.
Yes, that is a century relative so deshi you should name ever shoot a lava is a century relative
So this is such a powerful prayer because if we think about it, we are praying for every last sentient being to be able to have happiness and to be well, to be free from illness. That means that every single one of those vast sentient beings that we pray for acts as a basis for the accumulation of merit. So what greater merit could there be than the making of this aspiration?
Oh, then social never she have forget never see what is.
It's also very clear that with this kind of aspiration, if there are unseen beings like ghosts or spirits that are harming us in some way, through making this kind of positive aspiration, right, they are rendered powerless and they move far away from us.
Oh, yeah, logical you are. Saja Halim, Saja Chinosa, and then we have magic and it's a motor and they become us. Such a kangal, people was Kimono Mobajadere. Don't they get the one never shares how you are. So there's
a story about a great meditator who was meditating on the wish for all sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And at the time that he was meditating, there were two malevolent spirits who actually wanted to harm or to disturb him. But as they heard the wish that he was reciting, they said, we can't harm this person because he's praying for our happiness, actually. So there would be no reason to harm them. So that is how the power of these intentions manifests.
Oh, this one, what I'm much to the
Lama state very clearly, actually, that if we have the occasion to kind of intersect with those beings like malevolent spirits, ghosts, and so forth that would want to harm us, if we meditate on love and compassion, this is the most powerful way to dispel that harm.
can see what you going to us. Yagal Saja Halevation, so what you put them over yours and never more. She's like, continue at the end. Akosara, and you money, can you pay a conzo pairs? And the Korogus was, and it was a candiga, but I didn't need you going to pay attention, any you go and the kaki segments. Such a deal. Akosara, or that course, so not only you should have what you call by depending was.
So then His Holiness the Dalai Lama also one time he was called to a place in India where there was a lot of spirit harms. There were a lot of ghosts and spirits that were causing all types of problems. And then after he was in that place, the people noticed that the harm radically decreased. So later when the harm returned, they again asked His Holiness to kind of return to that place. But he said, there's nothing that I could do other than meditate on love and compassion. So that's actually what you need to do to mitigate this harm. And they found that indeed, when they tried to cultivate love and compassion in that place, that the harm dissipated.
Roa can you cheat it on a Tambachi Rogan Java show tattoo is an amadu. Tandani is with the tattoo and Java but it's also Manojikanga.
May all samsaric beings live in accord with the Dharma, and may their every Dharma wish be fulfilled. So first we had those kind of temporary goals or wishes that are being fulfilled. This is actually praying for their ultimate or final aims. So this is a prayer that without bias, right, without any differentiation, is praying for all beings equally, to be able to achieve both all temporary happiness and ultimate happiness.
다 치라도 레라고도 되네. 대소만 논다고 되네. 세계 되네 소화에 비토는 영화시야 봐라. 생체 요소 좀 야와면 나도 놓치게 돼. 이도 공화 야버지서 그게 소화요 가지고 야마도 되고 소만 논다. 레라고 용어 말was.
So it's easy to recite these words, but to actually bring forth that pure intention and wish for the temporary and ultimate benefit of all beings without bias, without differentiation, this is something that is measurably more difficult. So here is where our practice of, for example, within the 7 points, that practice of seeing beings with affectionate love or seeing them as attractive as the same as the person closest to us, this is where that is very important.
Yes, 다 단단히 소화에 비토는 mel로 그게 비타 보지. 아주 영화시야 봐라. 생체 야와면 봐라. 이지 소화 소설 때 먹고 was.
In order to really say this prayer with complete commitment, right, and bring forth its ultimate purity, it's very important for us to be able to see all those beings without differentiation, with that equal compassion. Very important.
Yes, 다 생체 야와면 봐라. 이지 그게 전부 다 소화시 잡아지 영화시야 봐라. 이지 비타 보 용사가 뭔가 이래. was 돼야 봐.
And in order to be able to bring forth this powerful compassion, the compassion that is unbiased and equal for all sentient beings without exception, we think about those two pathways to the development of that.
다 노진한테 해야 돼. 아니 코에게 요다잖아. 저거래. 두마지 차반도 저거 두마 서 그게 생체 요도 나와 돼야 보시네라. 다 뒤톤에 다니 지도이나.
So one path towards developing that compassion is thinking about those beings within samsara, within cyclic existence, and thinking about the different types of suffering they experience. In name, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive or compounded suffering, deeply comprehending that, and as a result, bringing forth compassion, the wish for them to be free from that.
쇼지데 아니 생제 여면 뭐시바도 니에도 담에와 강가로 자침고 까지 침고 아고서와 어따티 제모 돈이 아니 아니지 그래야나 지지.
The other way to think about it is how all sentient beings have been equally kind to us. For that reason, they are equally precious. They all possess the same potential. And based upon that understanding, the feeling of unbearable closeness to them, wishing for them to be completely free from problems, this is another angle through which we can cultivate compassion. So if we want to bring forth a really high quality practice of compassion, actually, we need both of these strategies in place. If one of those strategies is missing, we won't have that sort of holistic compassion.
Yes,
And so in this way, we out of 16 of those prayers, we have covered one of them. So the prayer made through the pure superior intention out of the 16, we have covered that one. And so then the next one is to be able to practice the bodhisattva way without forgetting. And within that, there are 7 points.
This one,
and so as we begin, remembering my past lives and all varieties of existence. May I practice the bodhisattva way. So those 2 lines.
This one? This one.
So by remembering one's past lives in a variety of existence, the idea is that this brings one back into the practice of the Dharma. Delatene chulan yamnan chekyari. And also one on the basis of one's previous practice has in the subsequent lifetime the opportunity to improve on that. And on the basis of being able to improve and realize on the basis of that, one is going to be able to benefit to meet all of those disciples that one will meet and be able to benefit them. Yeah.
Little men at about Kalemo, little Kanemo,
Yeah.
So,
so it is said that amongst the holders of outsider tenets, right? So the other philosophical schools besides Buddhism of ancient India, there's one of them that is holding at the extreme of holding at the practice of morality or mortification as extreme. And they think that actually the way to achieve realization is kind of by an extreme denial through an ascetic existence.
This one,
Yeah. There's another wrong view held that some of these holders of outsider tenets thought that they would sort of play act being a pig. They would play act acting like a dog. And by acting like a pig and acting like a dog, they're going to somehow purify the animal karma and get like a human rebirth in their next life. Yeah. So this is holding extreme conduct or morality as supreme. Yeah, so seeing that sort of outer, how could we say, that outer comportment, right? That outer comportment or behavior as supreme.
Yes,
So based upon like some understanding that they had these previous lives in these animal forms, they thought if I act out in this human form as being like a pig or a dog, that's going to purify me, purify the causes of me maybe being reborn as an animal in the future. Oh, Chuganga. Yeah. And so there's a story that has been told before about the mother and her child in the Ganges River, and because when they fell into the Ganges River, they both drowned, but because they were both thinking of the benefit only of the other and wishing to save them, on the basis of that virtuous mind, they were able to be reborn in a Deva realm, in a God realm.
And
it is said actually that on the basis of that mother and daughter who were drowning, but thinking only of the other's benefit, being reborn in the God realm, there came this view of if I take a dip, right? If I bathe myself in the Ganga, in the Ganges River, I'll be able to purify myself of all of my sins, right? And so many people are holding this now. And so when the Buddha was in this world, Kungao Dangzhou Kandis. So at the time when the Buddha was in this world, there was a highly cultivated bhikshuni, a highly cultivated nun. And she achieved the state of a foe destroyer. And it is said that after her attainment of the state of a foe destroyer, she developed like a special liking for Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's attendant. Yeah.
Then Jima, then so thirdly, Sonjela Gator, Corolla Gator, Jima de Jabicala, Koro Nanzo Nojita, Koala Yopical Chipibar was, only to work Pamani Pugiche, which you have Levi Kenta Wachipo. Akasara, so Mashi Gudin Pamani Shuluma, you have the cat. Cases over to us.
Yeah.
Akasara, there's a Picala, and Amati Koropuis that I need it and the Garushuma, you know, Nozation over to us. They watch Mochanas, the Shuluma.
Shulama.
Sicilian Martin.
So like Bene, also Bene, also Yanini, Begit. Okay. Yeah. So then so this relates to a time where they were samsaric beings. Venerable Ananda and Galongma were samsaric beings. And at that time, there was a couple. And that couple gave birth to a child who was somehow like deformed or had some sort of serious issues. And because of their embarrassment, actually, they wanted to put that child outside and hide him away where nobody could see him. But at that time, the mother, because it was her child, she felt like a little bit discouraged, a little bit sad. So okay, sorry, Tama konso kampala bene nyarson konso the gas yeah. And so because of fearing that people would see this child and somehow judge them, they put the child, abandoned the child in a very far away place. And so it is said that actually that child that was abandoned in the faraway place, that Venerable Ananda met that child, and that on the basis of his interaction with that child, the child was able to become a quite highly evolved practitioner. And so at that time, he was able to become a very high practitioner. Loso, dene shison dene kewa jema. So then, on the basis of that, he cultivated that abandoned child, cultivated to a very high level. He wasn't able to complete his cultivation. He passed away. He was reborn as a woman who became this bhikshuni, who achieved arhatship, and at that time Ananda was still alive, and she was the one who had a tremendous liking for him. So that was the past life connection that the Buddha explained. And so the Buddha is able to kind of perfectly perceive all of those relationships through his clairvoyance. And so this story actually illustrates this important principle of the dependent arising of a cause and effect. And so now we will turn our attention to Lama Tsongkhapa's in praise of dependent arising. Yeah, so we will okay. So we are on, for those of you who are following, we are on verse number 5. Whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instructions can there be more amazing than this statement? So this is a very short verse, but actually contained within this short verse, there's many amazing points actually. So what's the reason that we need to make such a big deal, that we need to kind of bring out this point, sort of highlight this point that whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence? Why is this such a big deal?
하고서 왔어. 아마 지자반 놀아 요아래. 지자빈 나온 카시고 지내라. 나로서 세제 강가로 단도아리 쪽에 세제 요도 거의 지 쪼대. 하고서 단자 고자가 단자 말이 봐. 지지 단자 말이 봐.
So actually, to illustrate this, we can think of Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400, where he is explaining that all sentient beings remain wandering in samsara, remain circling in samsara because of the two graspings, the grasping at a self of persons and the grasping at a self of phenomena.
대니가 단자 고자가 단자 말이 봐. 지지 단자 말이 봐. 니가
So the king that sort of creates all of these problems, all of these difficulties that we encounter within samsara are these minds of the ignorance grasping at a self of persons and the ignorance grasping at a self of phenomena. And what are these two minds actually thinking? What is the grasping at the self of persons and the grasping at the self of phenomena actually thinking? How are they actually perceiving things? And in terms of the self that they are cognizing, what is that like, right? What does that mistaken apprehension actually look like?
다 tellatene ama japa no yoare tene japi dawana kasiwo chine le pade dawa trabe tela daji shawan konshini bono je yela ra malipa.
So this is explained in Aryadeva's 400, and then it is further explicated by Chandrakirti in his commentary, which says that a self, the entity, which is not dependent on other factors and is inherently existence. The lack of that, in other words, that mistaken understanding, the lack of that is selflessness. That's what we mean when we say selflessness. It's this idea of the unitariness of that self, whether we are talking about that self of persons or that self of phenomena, right? That independent unitary idea. So if you think of the self of persons, mainly we'd be talking about this idea that the self or the I is something stable, independent, unitary, right? It's not depending on other factors coming together for its arising.
Yes,
Because of our conception, our false conception as the self of being like that, then through that lens of confusion, when we perceive other objects, if we perceive them as good or pleasant, we will think that they are good or pleasant from their own side. They are good, they are positive from their own side. Moreover, they are unitary, they are independent, not depending on the arising of other factors, right? So it goes outwards. Similarly, if we encounter something unpleasant or that person we have difficulty with or whatever, we are through that lens of confusion thinking that that unpleasant thing is something unitary, independent. It exists from its own side, not depending upon other factors. Those two fundamental misperceptions, they reinforce these afflictions of attachment and aversion. And where did this whole story start? It all arose from this fundamental misconception of the I, of the self, as being unitary, independent, arising from its own side, not dependent upon other factors. The Buddha said that there is not a self, there is not an I like that is unitary independent, because the I, the self, arises only through the coming together of many causes and conditions. Therefore, this line of reasoning, this way of thinking, can defeat the king that is the source of all of our difficulties within samsara, within cyclic existence. This line of reasoning in the initial stages, it will help us to greatly diminish the attachment and the aversion that we experience. As we continue to refine it, it will eventually be able to defeat the king of our problems, the ignorance grasping at the self. La? So, our way of dealing with our problems at the moment is a little bit like somebody who lives downstream from a river and is trying to put up little barricades around their house so that the house doesn't flood. That's what we're like when we try to solve our problems. And there might even be like, some negative minds mixed with that. Like if I sandbag my house really well, the water is going to miss my house and it's going to get the neighbor who I don't like, right? So it could be mixed up with a lot of those kind of minds. What the Buddha is saying is identify the source of the problem. So you would go to the headwaters of the river and then you would build a dam, right? That's the way to solve the problem. The one who explained this profound truth in its entirety is none other than the Buddha. Therefore, I offer him homage. This is the mood in which Lama Tsongkhapa composed this text in praise of dependent arising. So, to give you the quote from Aryadeva's 400 then, as things come about by dependent arising, seeing this, ignorance will not arise. Therefore, make all effort in this, since only this topic shall be related here. In other words, in this part of the text, only that topic is being discussed. If we're able to see that things arise dependently, that things are dependent arising, based upon that understanding, we can stop that ignorance from coming up in the mind. So having understood that, then we should bring forth all of our efforts into being able to realize that understanding of dependent arising. The root of all happiness, in fact, can be said to be that very realization. And of course, within that, there are many more subtle points and more coarse, more evident points, and we will slowly try to come to a discussion of more of those. So thank you very much. We shall pause the teaching here. We'll do the dedication, and then after the dedication, if you need to go and get on with your day, please feel free. But if you'd like to hang around for questions, you are very welcome. So yeah, we'll come to more of that discussion. That particular stanza or passage from the 400 verses Geshe really likes, so I think he'll want to return to that. Changju Senju Rinpoche Maje Kwanam Cheju Jeba Nyamba Beba Yang Done Gondu
ni tawa che maje panam che jurche jeba jamba me baya gone gondu.
Nice tune from Geshe today.
Jamba ao jeda geba da zamba deya deda bunge jesu nalo gewa dida tamje rat Duzu shebe gewa tamje Mowa nonai chuvata Dagi gewe sawa dikya Zambo chekya adu.
May the doctrine of the Buddha and connected with that, the happiness of all sentient beings continue to shine and flourish. And through these merits, may all of the difficulties of beings, illness, imbalance of the elements, and so forth be completely cleared. In order to be able to bring forth our realizations of love, compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth, we need good physical health. We need good mental health. So may any obstacles to our physical and mental health be completely cleared away. So we'll pause there. Just give me a moment to turn on the volume, and then if there are questions, we are happy to take them. So yeah, Geshe is just outlining the importance of that particular verse from Aryadeva's 400, as well as the commentary, the gloss of that verse by Chandrakirti. These are very, very important to revisit when we have time. So when we're engaging in our practice, right, we want to hit the target correctly with those arrows of wisdom. But if we can't identify the target, we're not going to be progressing very well. So the first step is to identify the target that we need to hit. So at the moment, it's like we're shooting all these arrows in like all of the 10 directions because we don't know where the target is and we're not aiming for the target correctly, right? So we don't want to do that. And so related to this is Lama Tsongkhapa's profound and important instruction to identify the object to be negated correctly. We must correctly identify the object of negation. So we welcome questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Dave, yeah.
So Geshe used, or you used in translation, the word unbearable compassion. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Nganzo the Ningje the ale nganzo kandiswa gure Ningje sena chose choksu lungwa mepe Ningje dabochik like mikashe yaboyori mikashe dukshe. Yeah. So Dave, that's probably my error. I should have said unbiased rather than unbearable.
Okay.
Yes, my apologies.
Is-
Sometimes you see unbearable. I probably
Yes.
that just came out wrongly, but it was unbiased. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
makes sense.
they-
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because you use the context of feeling close to sentient beings, and I thought,
Yes.
okay, that doesn't seem to be consistent. I mean, Lama
No, right.
Rinpoche uses the term elsewhere, developing unbearable compassion. But yeah, I
Yes,
wonder
no,
if,
unbearable compassion is something you will see, but in this case, I misspoke. So yeah, unbiased compassion is what I should have stated. Not so no jujitsu. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Ninja di sana di kashe tanya po tarin po maris. Nga duru jam mitu bagi di chela swan mone. Inji kinang la tsika wala hajo. Anyways, I let Geshe know. Yeah, so it's unbiased, unbiased.
对，也，这在你之前比较了，因为说吧，是那个地方，说没记过那个么对吧？是多少个月？
And also related to this, actually, when we speak about the love that is necessary to bring forth compassion, right? It's not love in the usual sense. We talk about affectionate love, or the love that sees all beings as close, as attractive. That's absolutely essential to bring forth that unbiased compassion.
yeah. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome, Dave. Any other questions?
President,
다시 내래,
다시 내래.
I have a question, page 5. It said, may I always abandon the householder's life. That's difficult to understand for me. Because from my experience, when I practice the best when I have a lot of suffering. And I think households have a lot of suffering, and I know a lot of monks living in all kinds of monasteries, and they have a quite protected life, far away from a lot of suffering. And as a whole householder, you are in contact with a lot of suffering. So in my way, it's just a good, stimulating way to make progress, you know. So that's my question. Why is this in this text? Why is this householder's life something we want to abandon, you know?
Yes, yes. Nganso tsikshe chiki nangla rwa, nganso kewa ne kewa rabtu jongwa rwa, nganso kimse gi mitse pango gire duas. Di kare chene res, karin sena ko chena, korang mitse gi nangla nang mi din so yo sang, legen din so yo sang, dela tene nyotra mambo tu gidus, dene dela tene ngenjung mambo chik yong tu gire duas, rwa zupa gomsa mambo yong tu gire duas, yine gumpa nangla kadine kiboyedes nyocha chatsawa tarimpo ne yensang roa dene dinso goka yomares roa dene chok di samlo thana chichena di kimse di kanesal gre di nyamne che yaga drotugire dusa.
Yes, so
Geshe said it's a good question, but he didn't cover that part of the verse yet, partly because he was thinking about how he was gonna mention this point. So firstly, acknowledging that there is truth in what you say. Many of those things that we encounter as a householder, as a layperson, can be very beneficial to our cultivation. Certainly they can. And let's be very clear, having a family life doesn't mean that you can't achieve realizations of definite emergence or renunciation, of love, compassion, patience. Definitely, a layperson with a family responsibilities is able to achieve all of those realizations, no question. Yeah, yeah. So perhaps what's being emphasized here is that when we want to develop these positive mental qualities such as love and compassion, we need to have the conditions to be able to engage in analytical and placement meditation as much as possible, because it is through that analytical and placement meditation that we will be able to achieve a valid cognition of those positive minds. So this could be one possible reason this is stated. And in the scriptures, it says that for one who is dedicated to meditation, fewer responsibilities and fewer distractions are advisable, right? That's what the scriptures advise. So if we are a responsible family person, we want the best for our spouse. We may have children. We want the best for our children. We have a responsibility to be able to provide the best life for them that we can. And so a lot of our energy goes to securing those favorable conditions so that our family can abide happily. Because of the energy that we have to put into that, for many, it could be more difficult to find the time for meditation. But that doesn't mean impossible, and that also doesn't mean that lay people cannot realize those same positive mental qualities. As for your point about the monastery being peaceful and great and not seeing the problems of samsara, if you spend some time in the monastery, you'll actually see that the problems of samsara are definitely in the monastery or the nunnery. The monastery or the nunnery is not a perfect place. All of the conditions are there in the monastery or in the nunnery to have an upset mind. All of the conditions to age, to get sick, and so forth, those are still present in the monastery and the nunnery. The monastery and the nunnery is not a perfect place. But also keep in mind that in the Buddha's teaching, there were times where people with many worldly responsibilities, kings, ministers, and so forth, approached the Buddha and they said, how can I work towards enlightenment without neglecting those responsibilities? And the Buddha gave many very deep and profound teachings specifically for the householder, right? So there is definitely a path of practice. Well, so actually this is quite a big topic, and as we continue in the text next time we'll visit this more, but yes, this is an important topic. So a good monk or nun, if they have nice conditions, they may have more opportunities for practice. That's all that's being said here. But if they don't exert themselves, right? If the monk or nun doesn't exert themselves with that extra time that they have, then it's not much benefit to being a monk or a nun, frankly. But similarly, the householder who is really dedicated and makes time for the practice, sets aside some quiet time at home to meditate, they can also progress exponentially. So yeah, thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Go ahead, Mark. Maybe not. I noticed, Mark, you're unmuted, but do you have a further question or another question?
Oh, no.
Yeah, okay.
He's okay. Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks. Any other questions?
None on Facebook.
None on Facebook. Okay, it's a quiet day today. Maybe it's the rainy weather. At least here in Ontario, it's November has finally arrived. Oh, diesel. Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody. If there's no further questions, maybe we'll end it 10 minutes early and we'll let everyone get on with your day. We will see you Don't forget, we will see you next Sunday. For the folks in the Netherlands, we'll see you on Wednesday, actually. And then also don't forget what I mentioned about this Tara retreat at the end of the year on the 30th, the 31st, and the 1st. There's going to be a Tara retreat. So keep an eye on our webpage. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, Tuji.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Have a wonderful
Thank you
day.
very much.
Love you,
Thank you.
Geshe.